Welcome everybody to Office Hours, and it's good to present to you again. I'm going to talk to you about Windows 11 today and just some things that you need to know about it. You may already have seen some of this information, but a lot of this is going to detail some of the changes on things like lifecycle manageability. If you're planning, you may be planning a Windows 11 rollout. Maybe you might already be in the process of one. You may be planning one for later this year. So are starting to purchase machines and have Windows 11 pre-installed on those machines. So I think what you'll find as we go through this presentation that for the most part, if you're very familiar with Windows 10, Windows 11 should be very easy to get up to speed on. There's from a management standpoint, there's not a whole lot of difference, but there are some subtle changes, obviously, when it comes to things like hardware requirements. There's been some changes with lifecycle that you need to be aware of. So we just want to make you aware of those changes as we move forward, as you start to plan your Windows 11 deployments, and then also some things that you may want to consider as well when you're just some other pieces of guidance that I think that are specific to education. Hardware requirements. Well, actually, let's go back to how can you still get Windows 11 today? So Windows 11 is going to be available through the same channels that Windows 10 is available through, and that's like through, you can get monthly ISOs available for download from MSDN or VLSC. So if you're still doing building custom images for your organization, before you start to go out and build a new one, go out to VLSC or MSDN and grab that latest one. It'll have all the, servicing stack updates. Plus, if you're doing things like, it'll also contain newer fixes for things like autopilot, or especially if you're going to be doing some testing with autopilot. I believe one of the last non-security related updates had a whole bunch of autopilot fixes in it. So just make sure that you're using the latest media from MSDN or VLSC. If your devices are managed, meaning that they're managed with Configuration Manager or Intune, and you're running the Pro, Enterprise, and Education SKUs, Pro Education SKU of Windows 10, you have the same control of when and how those upgrade, just like you do today in Windows 10. And of course, a couple of things that you need to just be aware of, any upgrades that you're running via the setup.exe command, those have to be on Windows 8 or higher, preferably Windows 8.1.1 update. I believe Windows 8.1 and Windows Server 2012 are actually starting to go out of support next year. So if you do have any of those machines in your environment, especially on the server side, go ahead and make plans to get those devices, those OSs upgraded so that you don't miss out on security patching. And then Windows Update only will upgrade any device that's running Windows 10 20H1 or higher. That's assuming that the hardware requirements have been met. So what are those hardware requirements that are needed for, let's see. Ryan just told me the slides are not advancing because I need to advance it. So what are your Windows 11 hardware requirements? So hardware requirements are 1 gigahertz processor or faster on the board, or system on the chip. You have to have 4 gigs of RAM at least minimum, 64 gig hard drive. Also, from a system firmware standpoint, it does have to be UEFI compatible. So there's no more legacy BIOS. You can't take your machines and put them into the legacy BIOS mode. You have to make sure that you're using UEFI firmware. Also, the device's secure boot does need to be enabled, and you must have a TPM 2.0 chip on the device. Depending on the OEM, if you some TPM firmware, some TPM chips may be updated with a firmware upgrade. So, with any piece of hardware, what I would suggest is that you consult with your OEM manufacturer. see if they are providing the necessary drivers. You're in pretty good shape if you bought a PC around 2017, 2018. In most cases, those devices should support Windows 11. Although, again, you need to check with your OEM manufacturer to make sure that they provide the necessary support. Internet access is going to be required to perform some updates during the out-of-box experience, and we actually require an internet connection and a Microsoft account to complete setup of Windows 11 Home Edition for first use. Now, if your organization runs Windows in S mode, or running Windows 10 in S mode, you do need to, if you're on a managed device and running that, you do need to switch the device out of S mode prior to the upgrade. That is something that you can do with Intune. Of course, that is a one-way change, so you will not be able to revert that device back to S mode, as that does not exist in Windows 11. There are some additional requirements, specific feature requirements that may need to be considered on the device, depending on what the device is going to be used for. So, for example, if you're going to use BitLocker to Go or Client Hyper-V or Microsoft Teams, Touch, two-factor authentication, Windows Hello, Wi-Fi 6, all of those things need to be considered. But Windows 11 does have support for a lot of those newer features to ensure that they are compatible, that they'll work correctly. Application compatibility. It pretty much, for the most part, if your apps work on Windows 10, they should work on Windows 11 now, but it's part of the, it's still a Windows 10 code base. So from what I understand, you don't have to upgrade your KMS servers. You may need to check with third-party vendors. If you're using third-party antivirus or VPN clients, you may want to check with those with your vendor to ensure that they have that they're compatible with Windows 11. But in most cases, they probably their latest clients at this point are going to be compatible. So, but for the most part, your line of business apps should work on Windows 11 if they worked on Windows 10. If you do run into issues where, for whatever reason, you have a line of business application that does not work on Windows 11, you do have access to a fast track resource called App Assure, and we will work with your organization to ensure that you can get your devices up to speed on Windows 11, or you get your apps. Of course, all of your websites should work on Windows 11. Again, Edge is the main browser. Internet Explorer has been removed on all of the client desktop OSs back in June of 2022. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the Internet Explorer compatibility mode that's built into Microsoft Edge. And if you specifically have websites or you have web applications that require that Internet Explorer compatibility. So this is probably one of the big changes that that Windows 11 brings that's different over Windows 10, is specifically going to be around the release cadence of the operating system. So traditionally, Windows 10 has been on a 2-year, what we call a semi-annual channel release cycle. That means that since 2017, we have released 2 feature updates per year. And we did that through 2021. So starting in 2022, we are going to go to 1 feature update per year and with Windows 10. So there isn't any, you should not, and again, it's kind of hard to believe, but Windows 10, it does go into life within 3 years from now. So in about 3.5 years, October 2025. It doesn't seem that long away, but as we all know, time flies. So just make sure that you keep that in the back of your mind, that October 14th, 2025 is when is end of life for Windows 10. Now, you're still going to have the same monthly cumulative updates in Windows 11 that you have in Windows 10. There isn't going to be any change there. So we're still following that same, Patch Tuesday that we have for years. and that with a B week update release. And then usually we will have an optional C or D week update release, which will contain non-security related fixes. That's a great way to start testing out any fixes in an organization, in your environment, before the release of the B week update, which would contain those non-security and security related fixes. One of the things that you'll definitely notice is the lifecycle support, depending on the SKU of Windows that you're actually deploying in your organization. So if you're deploying just the Pro versions of Windows, like the Pro Education, or Pro for Workstations, those were 18. Those are in Windows 10. Those SKUs, Windows 10 SKUs, were on an 18-month life cycle. In Windows 11, all our Home Pro and our Pro SKUs have moved to a 24-month life cycle. So what that means, again, is that we will, from the point of general availability, we will support that version of Windows 11 for 24 months with security updates and non-security related fixes. Volume license additions, for Windows 10, our spring releases typically had 18 months and our fall releases had 30 months. And again, our volume licenses are those volume SKUs of Windows 10. That's the Education and Enterprise SKU. Enterprise multi-session, if you're using Azure Virtual Desktop, those had an 18 and 30-month life cycle. With one release per year of Windows 11, we're going to go to a 36-month life cycle. So that gives you a full 3 years from the time of general availability. So currently, right now, the Windows 11 21H1 or 21H2 is about 8 months into its life cycle. So it went general availability in October of 2021, and you can do the math from there. So we're probably, I would say, and not this coming October will be 24 months. So you're still in pretty good shape if you're still deploying this version of Windows 11 out in your environment. Now, also be aware that we are going to have a fall release of Windows 11 version 22H2 is what it's going to be called. That's now in Windows Insider and release preview. So what that basically means is that it's fully, most of is feature complete. So with each cumulative update that we release in the beta and the release preview channels, we're going to be adding new features. It is a great time to start testing that release in your environment. You can call Microsoft support and you can get assistance with any issues that you may run into. So it's going to be fully supported in a production environment while you're doing your testing. So if you do run into issues, you can definitely open a support ticket. We've also made some improvements in the quality updates. Due to more efficient packaging, you'll notice our LCUs, and again, the LCU, the acronym for that is latest cumulative update. So with the more efficient packaging and removable differentials, we've been able to reduce the size of that package size from about 40%. You'll probably notice over time, especially with earlier versions of Windows 10, that those cumulative updates tended to start getting pretty large as that version of Windows 10 started to get some age on it. And so what that's also going to translate into is reduced download size to the client. So the more up to date your devices are, the less that they'll need to download and install to get them up to the latest version of Windows 11. Also, too, the orchestration has improved. So again, if you're, one of the nice things that if you're using like Windows Update for Business, it takes care of that unified platform update technology, meaning that the service stack, all of the pieces that you need to get installed, like the servicing stack update, is already orchestrated in there. So there's no more of this, I have to install a servicing stack update before I can install my latest cumulative update. So you should notice a lot of improvements there with the quality updates as well. As you go, so how do you attain Windows 11? So again, it's going to be basically the same way that you got Windows 10. Either you buy it on a new device or you upgrade a Windows 10 device to Windows 11 that is hardware eligible. So one of the first things that you're going to notice that if you purchase Windows 11 on a new device is that there's going to be a whole new out-of-box experience. So all the screens have been redesigned. There isn't any Cortana built into the out-of-box experience. All of those screens are going to be pretty much the same. A lot of, especially if you're using autopilot to provision your devices, and again, all of the same technology that you use for autopilot today, whether you're using like user-driven Azure AD join or user hybrid join or self-deploy or pre-provisioning, all of those are still going to work in Windows 11 the same way. So, but again, just a new user out-of-box experience that you'll need to make sure that your users are familiar with. If you are going to be performing Windows 11 upgrades in your environment, meaning that you're just going to target Windows 11 to your devices, you still have the same tools that you can use today that you had in Windows 10. So if you're mostly still have a lot of your stuff is on premise, if you have, like, for example, if you're using standalone WSUS, you will need to sync your WSUS server. It will create a new Windows 11 category. If you're using Configuration Manager, maybe you're using In-Place Task Sequence Upgrade to upgrade your Windows 10 devices to Windows 11. At least make sure that you're on the 2107 release. And in addition to that, there is a Windows 11 ADK and boot WIMs that you will need to update to as well. Now, I don't foresee any new version of an ADK coming out for the 22H2. I've not seen, usually we would have already released that. But anyway, definitely just keep that in mind.
There actually was a new 22H2.
Oh, there was?
Yeah, it's
okay,
inserted
cool.
out.
Oh, cool. Can you drop the link in there for that?
Yeah.
Cool. Let me go back to that slide. Thanks, Richard. That's why we keep you employed around here. So the other thing too I want to make mention is that if you're using things like cloud tools like Microsoft Endpoint Manager or with Intune, you can easily you can use the feature update policy inside of Intune to get those devices also upgraded to Windows 11 as well. And then, of course, we covered this in a session back in June, but using endpoint analytics and update compliance, we showed some of that, but those are also great cloud tools that you can use to measure your upgrades as well. So there's plenty of, one of the things that I like about endpoint analytics is that you can point that to any of your devices that you might be co-managing. You can use it to your own Intune only devices. And that will give you some pretty good insights into whether those devices can handle a Windows 11 upgrade. Now, when it comes to third-party management tools and analytics, again, you'll need to consult with your ISV as to what what their capabilities will be. But at some point, they should be able to support Windows 11 upgrades, I would think, by this point. So what has not changed from Windows 10? So I'm not going to cover every one of these bullets, but again, it's still a Windows 10 at its core operating system. The tooling and management hasn't changed. So the settings catalog, for example, in Intune is still going to work on Windows 11, just like Windows 10. You'll still be able to run multiple OS feature sets. You'll still be able to use Windows Autopilot. We still recommend using the update rings, our ring strategy, and then licensing and service maturity. All of that still is pretty much going to be the same as it was in 10. What has changed? Again, Cadence moved to once a year. I think that's going to be one of those things where you as an IT administrator are going to like that. You're not going to have to worry about 2 feature updates. You just have to do one, and a 36-month window, especially on the enterprise and education SKUs, is going to be some welcome news. And I think most of all of you will like that. Now, one of the things that you will need to probably have developed documentation or training on for your users is going to be, there is a brand new UI. So that is probably going to have a new user experience. So, because we have integrated things like Teams, and consumer Teams is in Windows 11. Again, a new start menu in the center of the screen. What you will notice, and I will say this going forward, is, and we could probably do another session on this, specifically on the Windows 11 Start menu. There are some changes that are being planned in the 22H2 release over the 21H1 release. Specifically, you'll have the ability, right now you can just pin icons in 21H1, but you'll actually have the ability to create folders in the 22H2. So just something that, again, you'll need to, depending on if you're running different flavors of Windows 11, you might have different hardware or start menu requirements and pinning. So something that, we could definitely look into in another session. And then of course the hardware requirements, to complete that experience may be totally different. Some things that we have removed from Windows 11 that were in Windows 10, things like Cortana is not going to be pinned onto the taskbar. It's not going to be as part of the out-of-box experience that it was in some of the 18X and 19X versions of Windows 10. We've removed the news and interest section has evolved. We had a little weather pin down there in the taskbar that's evolved into widgets. We've replaced the snipping tool functionality, replaced start and taskbar menu functionality. And then, of course, some of the apps that were included, some of the inbox apps that we included in Windows 10, like 3D Viewer, OneNote, Paint 3D, and Skype, those have been removed from Windows 11, but they're still downloadable via the store. Now, what can you do as an organization to get ready for your Windows 11 deployment? So what you'll find is most of your group policy and MDM settings that apply in 11 will be the same for that were in 10 will also apply for 11. So we do have new ADMX files that are available for Windows 11. So I put a link here where you can go and manage your central store. So if you are planning to support Windows 11 devices in your environment, you'll want to at least, and you're still using GPO, you're going to want to go out there and update your ADMX files. Now, when it comes to Config Manager, you're definitely going to want to make sure that your site server is upgraded, at least running 2107. I believe we should be seeing 2203s out now. We should be seeing 2207 maybe at some point here. Usually it's about this time of year where they drop that release. So, just keep an eye out on it. The next couple of weeks, you should start seeing that available for download. But, again, make sure that you're also updating your ADK and your WinPE add-ons. So a lot of times you'll upgrade the ADK, but forget about WinPE. So you can import those boot images in there and make sure you update them with the latest, your drivers and all that stuff. If you're just using Intune to manage your devices, there's nothing you need to worry about. All that work has been done on the back end for you. A couple of other best practices that I've come across that some other that you may want to consider as you are deploying Windows 11 is there is a consumer version of Microsoft Teams that is built into Windows 11. So there's a couple of ways, some organizations, especially at the K-12 level, have asked about how they can disable the consumer version of Teams. One is that there's a few policies that you can enable. One is by blocking Microsoft consumer accounts from being added to the device. So this will prevent an Outlook.com, Live.com, or Hotmail.com account from being added. Also, you can you can configure a GPO or an MDM policy to remove the chat icon from the taskbar. So again, this is consumer Teams. This is not the work or school Teams that you're probably using in your organization now. You can even go a step further and you can actually remove the consumer Teams application from Windows 11 if you choose to do so. Usually that can be done via a PowerShell script. But that is something that is a common question because, again, you don't want students just starting with Teams. Disabling news and widgets. Now, this is an interesting one. In the initial version of Windows 11, you could only sign in to the news and widgets app using a Microsoft consumer account or MSA. Moving forward with the news and widgets, you will be able to use a worker school account in the 22H2 release. So that may be something, depending on the type of device, machines in your environment, you may have this policy enabled, you may not, depending on how you want it targeted in your organization, because I do believe at some point they are looking to open up the widgets to third parties. So it could be if let's say you're a university and you have a student or a faculty member who is signed in with their work or school account, that there may be a widget that your university has that could be used to display important information, announcements, things that might be of use. Also, a couple of other things that I just recommend for all customers, and again, ones I talk to, these are some of just my personal favorites, and it's not really it's my best practice. I'm a big fan of enabling OneDrive known folder move, and the 4 policies there. For example, and again, in K-12, you may want to prevent users from syncing personal OneDrive accounts, but I'm a big fan of this policy because it really makes management of a Windows device a lot easier. Your technicians are not going to be spending valuable time copying files out from folders. They're just, if you can educate users to keep files on the desktop, documents and pictures, and then when you have to give them a new device, they can, especially in a K-12, the student can just come in, hand their device, you give them a new one, and they go back to class, and your technician can spend their other amount of time, instead of moving files, they can just get that device repaired and get it ready to go back out for deployment. I also like to, for Edge browser, definitely make sure that you have your Azure AD account profile sync turned on. Again, that's one of those things where if you can have users save all their favorites, passwords to their school account, when they come back, if they have to swap out a device, they automatically have all of that, all their browser information there. And then, of course, you can also disable that first run experience as well, so it doesn't interfere with any instruction in a classroom. You can also do some additional security practices, disabling the adding of non-Microsoft accounts like a Gmail or Yahoo account. You can also, and again, this is more of a personal preference. I'm always like to simplify things. Right now, you have like 3 different ways that you can go and download software. You can use the company portal, software center. You can even use the store on Windows 10, where you can make it available where users can shop within your organization. I'm just a big fan of simplicity, so I like to train users either to use the company portal that's built for Intune or Software Center for a configuration manager, and have that be that one source of truth. And then again, I would always stress, if you have opportunity, start moving away from group policy. I'm a big fan of MDM policy. We achieved feature parity in September 2021 with that update. So anything Windows 10 2004 or higher, start using that, because you'll find today in Intune, you can go in there and deploy your Chrome browser settings. A lot of your GPOs are there today. And you can even do this in a hybrid environment. And a lot of the tools, if you look in the What's in Development page for Intune this month, you'll actually even see where you can start. They'll have some features where you can actually even import in your ADMX files, your third-party ADMX. So if you're using one for like Zoom or Firefox, you can import those in as well. And then take advantage of online subscription activation. That is perfect for scenarios where you may have hybrid workers, or those are even remote full 100% of the time. So instead of having to rely on a KMS server, if you just buy a device with Windows 10 Pro on it, use something like Autopilot. You can assign that Windows 10 license to the user, and then at that point, you can, when they log into their device, the device will upgrade to a Windows 10 Enterprise or Pro Education SKU. An education SKU, depending on what the underlying OEM SKU that shipped on the device. So lots of great things with Windows 11. I've been pretty happy with it for the most part. We are, again, taking feedback on Windows 11. So if you have anything, just go ahead and please send that to us, and we discuss that as a larger team every week about how it affects higher education customers. And yeah, so I do have the initial blogs when we did come out with the Windows 11 and GA back in the fall. I do have a lot of these blogs linked, so they're still great, even though it's probably been out for about 7 or 8 months now. Still a lot of good, useful information on those blogs. So we'll put this up in the file section after today, along with the recording. And then if there's any questions, just post those in the Teams channel, and we'll get those answered for you. So that is all I had for now. Any questions in chat that we want to see?
Yeah, there's just really one from Corland. He's talking about how Windows 11, the Windows 11 22H2 ADK doesn't have an x86 boot image, and that's because this is the release where we're going to 64-bit for everything. So there's not going to be any 32-bit support moving forward. Challenge though is that with SCCM and MDT, they still have the ability for you to support 32-bit boot media. So with SCCM, it's not that big of a deal really, because in most cases, well, in just about all cases, you're probably going to be using the 64-bit boot media anyhow. And with the 22H2 ADK, a few folks in the MVP community have actually already been testing this out, and they've published their own thoughts on it. The issues that they basically ran into were like, well, I didn't have a 32-bit boot media, but 64-bit was fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. But MDT is a bigger problem, because MDT, you actually will get error messages in the console when you try to import the media. So I've got a post here from Johan, who's one of the more well-known MVPs that deal with OSD deployments, and he wrote up his thoughts. I just posted the link in the chat. He posted his thoughts there on what he's noticed with the 22H2 media. But in actuality, it really shouldn't be that big of a deal for config manager customers. MDT, it's going to be a little bit more of a big deal. There are some workarounds, but also keep in mind that 22H2, this ADK, we have to release these early for OEMs and for device distributors so that they can get this media onto devices before holiday. So while the media is out there and you can grab it, that doesn't mean it's supported for Configuration Manager and MDT as soon as it's released. Those releases, if we have to make any code changes to MDT, or if we definitely will have a release for SCCM, but if we have to make any code changes for things, that stuff is going to happen closer to the release of Windows 10, or I'm sorry, Windows 11 22H2. So yeah, so that's basically the status right now on 22H2 and the ADK. Like, yeah, it's there, but you still need SCCM to be updated. You still need MDT to be updated to be fully supported. Will it work today? Well, Johan has his blog post that shows that it does work with some workarounds in some cases. But full support won't come until once Windows 11 is released around that time frame.
Okay, thank you. That sounds good. I mean, I went through that pain building a brand new site, noticed I didn't have an x86 boot image, had to fall back to an older version of the ADK. Just from working at an R1 institution with a lot of older and weirder research devices and having a need occasionally to deploy 32-bit LTSC type media, it's not that it's that there wasn't at the time any published like, oh, well, it's fine. Just go grab this version of the ADK and bring in the x86 WIM from it using this copy PE command. Like there was just no guidance in the moment, and it would be good to have. Here's how you grab the latest x86 that you can absolutely have, which will never support Windows 11, and that's fine as a caveat. But if you need to deploy LTSC, like it'd be good to have that as a one page, like, here you go. Here's the actual thing you should do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you've got older devices where you must have the x86 media, it's fine to have like a mixed environment like that, where you have an old x86 boot WIM, and then you've got a newer 64-bit boot WIM. That's fine. But yeah, it would be good if we did document that kind of scenario. You're right. Any other questions from anyone? I think there was a request for, I think Reed had a suggestion on a future session. If we can discuss moving from WSUS/SCCM to Windows Update for Business for Windows patching. We could, it'd be a really short session. Well, with a caveat. The actual movement is really just moving the work. If you're doing SCCM co-management, moving the workload from one to the other. But then it's okay, I've moved, but now what, right? Like, how do I do reporting? How do I do, how do I set up update rings? How do we do feature updates? And I think we talked a bit about this in a prior session. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good idea to
yeah, we did that session back in June. I think it was like the 29th. I did that session actually, but we could do a little bit more detail about maybe how to migrate, and especially if you are doing co-management, and go a little bit more in detail about like how for example, how the customer notifications or updates are going to be different. So like, for example, maybe you're using Config Manager and they're used to seeing the Config Manager notification. Although Config Manager is moving to use the native Windows notifications for updates. And how can you set up your rings, and then also go into detail again maybe about how to set up the update compliance. I think we just skimmed over that, but not actually how to set it up, but it's really easy to do.
Yeah, I think that might be a multi-part session where we go through the migration piece, and then how do we report on it after we've done that. So, good idea, Reed. Any other thoughts? Oh, Corlin saying, was that session recorded? Also, it seems like some settings referenced in many blogs have been removed regarding the nagograms customers get as deadline. Yeah. There have been quite a few blogs actually that have been posted by one of our product managers, Aria. She posts a lot about, these are the policies you should set, these are the policies you shouldn't set. And with Windows Update, it's like we've been doing Windows Update for a long time, maybe even longer than some people might even be on this call, how long they've been alive. Like, Windows Update policies and GPO have been around for a long time. And so a lot of that stuff has been carried over the years. And so there are a lot of policies that just don't do anything that a lot of customers still have turned on in their environments. And so there have been some good blog posts that have been written about what you should and shouldn't set. But the problem with that is that they get stuck in blog posts and they don't actually make it over to docs. And so now you as a customer have to kind of bridge that gap between, okay, I've got docs over here, but now I also have to keep up with blogs. But the blogs aren't, like, for some reason, they're not doc worthy. So I've got this good information in this blog, but it's not in the docs. Like, it's tough as a customer. Like, I completely understand where some customers could be frustrated by some of that stuff. So we can, in our session on Windows Update for Business, we can talk more so about what those policies look like, but also what your group policies are going to look like, especially if you're not using SCCM. Because if you're using SCCM today, then you really shouldn't be setting too many group policies, because a lot of the policy stuff is really local policies that's set by Config Manager. There are going to be some things that you probably will set in GPO, but it should be very, very few. But as you move all that stuff over to Windows Update for Business, you really shouldn't have any group policies, because all those policies should be set on the Intune side. And so we'll talk about that in that session. But yes, that session was recorded. Or actually, I'm pretty sure it was recorded. I have to go back and dig it out. I'm pretty sure Garrett had recorded that one.
Yeah, it would just be awesome to see, as somebody who's been working on some WFB policies and analyzing the impact. Like, I didn't realize how much I would hate removing the option to manually check for updates. And then I did it to myself, and I realized that, you hate it, right? So you got to try it before you buy it. But
right.
Looking at some of the blogs, like some of the very Intune specific blogs used to have a couple settings for, like, remind on this type of schedule, 24 hours, whatever. It seems like those aren't there, at least in the current tenant version I've got, which I didn't know if those just got you just enable them from a different policy, or if they're totally gone. And it's more just, I want some control of how frequently the nagograms pop up, just from the customer experience standpoint. And that's where I noticed they weren't there anymore from dog fooding it on myself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, there are in the rings, you probably noticed that there are the notification settings that are there. May not be quite the same as what you have in Config Manager, if that's where you're coming from. But yeah, we can talk about what we generally see done in most education organizations from a notification standpoint. Well, anything else? We got about 5 minutes, or we can just wrap up 5 early. Read also, we have to report monthly on patch compliance. We currently do SCCM compliance reporting, but how is that presented with Windows Update for Business? Okay, yeah, we can talk about that too. And it could also be that you might still, well, let me think about this. I was about to say that you might be able to still leverage SCCM reports for your update compliance reporting, but I don't think the update data actually gets sent back over to SCCM. Like in a co-managed scenario, you still send things like hardware inventory, discovery data, all that stuff still gets sent over to the SCCM environment. However, the update compliance data, I don't know if that gets sent over if you've changed your update source. However, what Scott just posted was update compliance data, and that, or the update compliance product that is integrated with Azure Log Analytics. And that's something we will talk about and what that looks like. And you can create custom reports. In fact, we've seen a number of MVPs create custom dashboards with the Log Analytics data that update compliance retrieves. And so you can actually go pretty deep in terms of the data that you want to display. It also goes into things like how delivery optimization is being used, how much bandwidth you're saving. So there's a lot of unique data that you can pull out of there that could be useful for monthly patch compliance reporting that you might have to send up to management. All right, folks. Well, I guess we'll wrap up a couple minutes earlier. Thanks everyone for coming today, and we will see you next time. Take care.